Hey everybody. Today we are talking about animals in the garden or thereabouts. So before we get into our first animals, animals overall can provide a lot of benefits to you and your garden. What we're talking about in this video is mainly raising animals for meat, eggs, and then utilizing the waste products, their manure, in the garden. And a warning: all of the animals that we're talking about are we're talking about them as meat animals. So just a heads up. Okay, so first let's talk about chickens. They are the most popular backyard animal for people to have. They do eat a variety of food scraps from the kitchen and can forage for food on their own. Um, they need a certain amount of space to do that, but not a ton of space. They are scratchers, right? So chickens, their main behavior is that they're scratching, pecking, looking for bugs, worms, things like that. And so in that way, they can be a little bit more destructive than some of the other animals we're going to talk about. They can reduce insect pests around the garden, depending on what those pests are. But if it's something that chickens can hunt, then they're going to eat it up voraciously. And their manure is very well known to be high in nitrogen and phosphorus. Their eggs and their meat are great and well known. And they can be rotated through a garden system using a chicken tractor or with fenced in rotations. I've seen people basically fence in, put the chickens in their garden and let them kind of free rein at the end of the season, or early in spring to kind of tear up all the weeds. And then after that, they'll take the chickens back out and put them in another pen, relocate them, and then go in, work, till the soil and plant. And obviously, when the chickens are in the garden, they're eating bugs, they're eating some food scraps and things, and they are pooping and fertilizing your garden. Now, here is an example of some of the work that chickens can do in your garden, whether you like it or not. They scratch up the soil, and they really can take it down to bare dirt pretty quickly. If you want that, then they are a blessing. If you don't want that, and they've escaped in your garden, they can be a terrible curse because they will destroy your garden, especially if you have young stuff growing. They love their food scraps. They love lots of piles of weeds and mulch and things like that. They will just rummage through that looking for bugs and worms and bits of food and seeds, things that they like to eat. Some examples of chicken pens. This is not a movable one. This is just a regular chicken pen or chicken coop. You always want to have these designed for ease of use so that you can collect eggs and take care of the chickens really easily. You want them to feel safe and you want them to be protected from predators. Their manure, like I said, really great fertilizer. You don't want to use the manure fresh in the garden. You want to either compost it or you want to work it into the soil and then wait at least several weeks before planting anything into it, for a couple reasons. One, it is very high in nitrogen, which can burn your plants. That's quotations burn. It's basically means when there's too much nitrogen in one place at one time for your plants to grow. And they can carry pathogens like salmonella and listeria, so you want to be careful of that. Composting your chicken manure is always the best in terms of preventing pathogens. But like I say, you can work it into your soil and then leave it for several weeks, at least 6 weeks, before planting into it. And of course, eggs, lovely, lovely eggs. And chicken, right? So we want to think about this when we think about utilizing waste products that are coming out of our kitchen. We are feeding scraps and things that would otherwise go in the trash. We're feeding them to an animal that is converting them into two things: this prized manure for our garden, meat, and or eggs. And so this is a really efficient conversion. Chicken tractors. Now, chicken tractors, there are actually other types of animal tractors that we'll talk about. Chicken tractors are by far the most popular. And all it is it's a small movable pen. Now there's different sizes of chicken tractors. Here's one that's not on wheels, where it's just a box that is laid over some raised beds. But essentially what a chicken tractor is, it's a movable pen where they have access to the ground. And what they're going to do is they're going to search for bugs, scratch around, and fertilize. And usually with the chicken tractor system, you're moving them every day to every week. So pretty consistently, pretty often moving them. And a lot of times these chicken tractors have everything that the chickens need, including their feed and their watering system, all intact, their nesting boxes, all of that stuff. And they're pretty cool because you can move them around. In some cases, people will leave them in one spot long enough to where they'll actually kill the grass. That takes quite a bit longer. But for the health of the chickens, moving them every few days is best. There can be parasites, things like worms or intestinal worms or chicken mites that can build up in an area if they're kept for too long. So moving them is really healthy. And it's also giving them a fresh source of greens and bugs and worms to eat, to forage on. And that's their favorite food. If they have a source of greens, bugs, worms, they're going to be healthy birds. And one more thing, back to the eggs and the meat. If you want to have consistent eggs and meat and chickens that are large enough to harvest for meat, what you're going to need is to feed them free access to some kind of a concentrated feed. That's the kind of thing you buy at the store, some chicken feed. But the food that you're feeding from the garden and from your kitchen is going to supplement that. So to sum up, chicken needs, like all the animals that we're going to talk about, they need 24/7 access to drinking water. This is really important for all these animals, but chickens can stop laying if they go without water for 2 days. They can stop laying for the rest of their lives, stop laying eggs, just because it's so much of a shock on their system. They need free access to feed, I should say, for good egg production or fast weight gain. So if you're raising them for egg production or meat, you're going to want to give them free access to feed. They need to be fenced out of the growing area because chickens can be very destructive for your garden. Now, if that's what you want because you're in between crops, then maybe that works out perfectly. But when you have things growing in there, you don't want the chickens in there. They need a covered area that is warm, dry, and they need bedding for laying eggs. So that's basically like a nesting area for the eggs to get laid. They need protection from dogs, coyotes, and birds of prey. Around here, we have eagles and hawks, and you'll see people put netting over their chicken pens. So not just the coop, but the pen area where the chickens range. Birds of prey can fly down and just scoop up the chickens, no problem. They are sitting chickens for the birds of prey. And then you want to keep them free from insect pests, worms, and disease. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that, including putting them in a chicken tractor and moving the chicken tractor regularly. Also changing their bedding regularly to prevent chicken mites, and giving them a nice healthy diet with plenty of food and water. And that's chickens. Next, we're going to be talking about ducks. Ducks are a personal favorite of mine. Compared to chickens, they are friendlier and quieter than chickens. They're great foragers. They eat not only bugs and caterpillars like chickens do, but they also eat slugs, snails, slugs and snails. They're great foragers, like I say. They eat food scraps just like chickens do. They have different preferences of the types of foods that they like to eat. They produce nutrient-rich manure, though it is harder to collect than chicken manure because of ducks' habits and the pens that you usually make for them. It's harder to collect the manure. Chickens roost at night, so you can actually just collect the manure under where they roost. It's much drier and easier to use and compost, easier to handle. Duck manure tends to be wet and tends to kind of just be messy and get everywhere. So if they're out and about, they are fertilizing wherever they go, but when they go in for the night and they're in a pen, it's hard to collect their manure. They produce wonderful eggs, which are larger and in some ways more nutritious than chicken eggs. And duck meat is wonderful. We're going to look at that in a minute. They can be rotated through the garden to eat pests and are much less destructive than chickens. And ducks can actually be trained to walk through the garden and forage and not disturb your crops. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Here is a duck with a slug. Slugs are one of the biggest pests, garden pests here in the Northwest. And so an animal that forages for slugs and then turns the nutrients in that slug into eggs and meat, that is a win-win. Ducks are used extensively in Asia in rice paddies, in rice farming. They eat snails and other pests that attack the rice. And again, they're turning pests into meat and eggs. They're also real pleasant to be around. And they like watermelon. So here's a duck egg on the left side of the two pictures and a chicken egg on the right. You can see the difference in size, and most of the size difference is actually because of the yolk. That yolk is much larger in a duck egg. And a lot of people actually prefer them for things like baking because they are richer, that bigger yolk. And duck is a very highly prized meat. So people have done some duck tractors. One of the things with ducks is they will be much happier, healthier, and cleaner if you give them access to water to swim in. And that can be water that they both swim and drink in. They're going to get it dirty in a hurry, so you want to change it regularly. If it's a small, like a kiddie pool or a small bathing tub, like in these pictures. But they will be much happier and healthier. Now, that's one of the problems with the duck tractor. One of the issues is you need to figure out a way of offering them water, but still being able to drain that water quickly and move the whole pen and then fill that water up again. And both of these systems have found their own solutions to that problem. The one on the left is a much smaller duck tractor, and the one on the right is a little bit bigger. But the same idea. There's wheels so that the whole thing is movable. And then you're also, you're going to have a water source in there for them. You're going to have feed. And ducks usually lay eggs on the ground rather than nesting boxes like chickens. So you go there in the morning and you collect the eggs usually. And then you can rotate your ducks through your garden or through your yard. So a duck's needs are similar to a chicken's needs. They need 24 access to water, 24/7 access to water for drinking, and ideally for bathing too. That's not an absolute necessity, but ducks do a lot better when they have a water source to swim in. They need free access to food if you want that high egg production and fast weight gain. You do want to keep them fenced out of your growing area unless you can get them trained to not cause damage in your garden, which I have a friend who she trained her ducks to follow a flag. So she would make a call in the morning and then hold a flag up, and all the ducks would follow her like ducklings in a row. They would follow her into the garden. She would walk through the garden with them. The whole time they would be eating slugs and foraging, and then they would follow her back out of the garden, back into their pen, and get their morning feeding. And that worked really good for her to keep slugs out of her garden. They need a safe area for laying. They need protection from dogs, coyotes, and birds of prey, just like chickens. Ducks, even more so, it seems like, are really vulnerable to dogs and coyotes too. The dogs and coyotes absolutely love to go into a duck pen and massacre every last one of them. I don't know why, but I've seen it happen several times. They tend to have fewer pest problems than chickens in terms of intestinal worms, parasites, and insect pests. So they're actually lower maintenance than chickens in a lot of ways. And that's about it for ducks. Our next animal is rabbits. Second warning, I will be talking about eating rabbits for meat. So rabbits are relatively easy to keep, and as far as backyard animals go, they actually have the highest feed to meat ratio. What that means is for every pound of food that you feed an animal, you get so many ounces of meat when you harvest that animal. And rabbits have the highest amount of meat per pound of food that you give them. So they're very efficient at turning food into rabbit meat. They eat a variety of food scraps and vegetable waste, including more fibrous things. They can handle more roughage than chickens can. When chickens are eating food scraps, they're really looking for things like cooked grains. They have a particular palate. Rabbits can eat a lot more of the kind of vegetable scraps that chickens won't eat. So old leaves and the stem ends of things, they'll eat all of that. Their manure is a great fertilizer. It's comparable to chicken manure, not quite as high in nitrogen, but comparable. Their meat is lean and healthy, and their pelts, their furs, are another valuable product. So here's an example of a rabbit hutch. Rabbits here, we want to keep them off the ground because we don't want them to get parasites that are transferred all over from the wild rabbits that live around here. And so rabbits here in the Northwest, we do want to keep them off the ground in a rabbit hutch. Here's a picture of their manure, which is very high in nitrogen, very dry, easy to collect, doesn't smell. Rabbit meat, yes, I warned you. This is some barbecued rabbit. And their pelts. which can be used for a lot of different things. And yes, people do rabbit tractors. This is a little example of one. So you can move your rabbits around rather quickly. I don't know if doing this in our climate might be dangerous in terms of them getting parasites, but yes, people definitely do it in certain places. So overall, rabbit needs, they, like all the animals we're talking about, need 24/7 access to water. They need free access to food if you really want to raise them for meat, and you want to raise them quickly to gain weight quickly. They do need a secure hutch that's built off the ground to protect against predators and prevent parasites and disease. Rabbits overall are a very underutilized and underappreciated backyard meat source because of the stigma around eating them. Rabbits are cute and fluffy, and therefore people don't generally like to eat them in the United States. In other parts of the world, there's absolutely no problem with it, and rabbit meat is enjoyed and appreciated. Okay, our last animal is pigs. Now, pigs are traditionally and around the world one of the most popular backyard animals to have because they're so great at eating a wide variety of food scraps. They can also forage and root for food depending on the breed of pig and also the space that you're giving it to forage for food. But they are the widest consumer of all of your vegetable and kitchen scraps. They eat most of it. Their meat is definitely popular. Everybody knows pork and bacon and ham. Their manure can be composted and used as a fertilizer. It has a good amount of nitrogen and phosphorus in it, though pig manure is one of the manures that can carry pathogens in it that can infect humans and make us sick. So you do want to compost it or work it into the soil well in advance of planting, at least 2 months. Though it's challenging, in some cases, they can be rotated through a garden system in order to clean up crop leftovers and to till the soil. But pigs, unlike the other animals that we've talked about, pigs are big and strong, and they need real sturdy fences to keep them in the area that you want them and keep them out of other areas where you don't want them. So this is pigs in heaven. They love kitchen slop. That's their jam. Obviously, we know the products that come from pigs. Now, here's some systems where pigs are raised, and you can also see some of the impact that they have on the environment. Now, if you look at the picture in the top left, you can see where the pigs are fenced in, and you can see the edge of the fence where they're not getting into and the difference. So pigs will really tear up the ground and make basically a dead zone of bare soil if you leave them in there long enough. And with pigs, it usually doesn't take that long. The main thing that they're actually looking for are worms and grubs. They do eat a few other things, but worms and grubs are usually what they're digging for. The bottom left picture is a movable pig pen. So you can see how sturdy it has to be to hold in those hogs. And that little covered area in the corner, that tarp, is where the pigs can get out of the rain if it starts raining. They tend to be pretty hardy, though, in the environment. They don't need a ton of protection. Definitely not as much as something like chickens. They're also pretty immune to predators, except if they're young pigs and you have large coyotes or wolves or dogs running around. Then you do have to watch out for keeping your young pigs safe. Top right is a permanent pig pen made out of concrete. And the bottom right is a pig tractor. So looking at that, I would say that those little pigs don't have enough room in their little pig tractor. I would give them more room. But either way, you're going to want to move those pigs very regularly, probably every day or two, so that they have fresh ground to root up. And then you could follow behind. So after you take them off of the ground, then you could work the soil and start planting a garden behind them. And that's how you could work your pigs into a crop rotation. So overall, pig needs are they need ready access to food. They need access to 24/7 access to water, like all the other animals we've talked about. They need to be kept in so that they are not destroying the rest of your yard or garden. But other than that, pigs are very hardy animals that don't have too many predators. Finally, overall, in conclusion, backyard animals can do many things for you in your garden. They can eat up some or all of your kitchen scraps and garden waste. They can provide a healthy source of food in the form of eggs or meat. They can provide a source of fertilizer for your garden. They can clean up and prepare sections of your garden and yard, which we talked about with the animal tractors. And they can also even provide other products like pelts and other things. Hope you guys learned something. And I will see you later.